to start the recording for myself. Okay, not for you. Sorry. Okay, here we go. It is the closest thing that we know of to a Celtic creation myth. And in the tale of the two battles, it's a compendium of ancient Irish magical lore. Okay, so on with it then. They say 'twas a place where time begins, and will begin. It is a teaching tale from ancient Erin that comes with a blessing for good fortune on both the teller of the tale and the listener. So the spell is cast. 3 times Erin put on the cloak of rocks and stones, of hills and trees. 3 times the great creator made what would be known as Erin, or in the end Ireland and Ironland. 1,000 times 1,000 years before anyone was there, the great creator placed upon this island the Firbolg. They're known as the people of the leather bag. Here were 4 bags, by the way. The number 4 is important. They raised the land from the 4 seas. Then in this story arrive a people called the Fomora or the Fomorans. Same people. They're described as living in castles beneath the sea. Some say they had 1 eye, 1 arm, and 1 leg. The truth is they had 1 eye to covet, 1 reach to grasp, and 1 step that was to invade. They held the Firbolg in slavery. The most dangerous king of the Fomorans was called Balor of the Baleful Eye. He had 2 eyes, but 1 he kept covered by a leather cover, a brass cover, and a lead cover. Whatever that eye beheld turns instantly to stone. The Firbolg paid a tax to the Fomorans each Samhain, that's each Halloween, of course, 2/3 of their corn, 2/3 of their milk, and 2/3 of their children to become slaves. At the same time, there was another race known as the Tuatha Dé. I say Tuatha Dé, not Tuatha Dé Danann. The people of art and skill, noble and magical. They learned their power and magic in the 4 cities of instruction. In Phalius, the city of stone. In Gorius, the city of the spear. In Findius, the city of the sword. And in Murius, the city of the cauldron. Okay, past, present, and future, as well as vocalization for magical creation. The king of the Tuatha was called Nuada, and they had a chief druid known as the Doida and also as the Allfather. The manuscript states that the cities were not of this world or even in this universe, but the words are universe near to it. They sailed in special ships to Erin, and they've been described both as burning ships or as ships that burned on the shores. They arrived on the 1st of May and sent their chief poet or bard to the bard of the Firbolg with battle terms. The Tuatha wanted a fight that was simply an equal number of men until they, Firbolg, surrendered or the Tuatha were all dead. They wanted a battle of equal numbers. The 2nd day of the battle, the Firbolg severed the king's arm off at the shoulder. On the 3rd day, then, the Tuatha, led by the Doida, the chief druid, turned the battle at last. On the 4th day, the Firbolg sued for peace. They were given Connaughts in all the Western Isles, including the Isle of Man. Now the Tuatha Dé were the lords of Erin. Nuada had to step down as king, though, because there was a law that said the king must be whole and unblemished. The great healer of the Tuatha Dé made Nuada an arm of silver, but still he was not fit to rule, for metal does not supersede the perfection of humanity. A new king was chosen, a man called Bress, or Bress the Beautiful, who was half Fomoran and half Tuatha Dé, because they thought it would be good for the peace of the land. It's important to know how such a thing could come about. The land of Erin is named after a beautiful woman of that time called Eriu. She was a goddess, by the way, and she was the mother of Bress. It was in May, a beautiful, gentle day, and she sat on the shore looking out to sea. A ship approached, just one ship with one man aboard. He had chestnut curls, a shirt of silk shot through with gold, and gold armlets on each hand. This man lay with Eriu against her will, and she wept. He was one of the 4 kings of Fomora, Elaha. He said she would bear a son and name him Bress, and then gave her a gold ring to put on her finger, on his finger, sorry. It was magic and would change size and fit only on the finger it was intended for. She said from now on, all things beautiful would be compared to him. Bress was beautiful, but he had a weakness in him for terrible greed. Not surprising. He made an alliance with the Fomora such that they enacted a tax on the Tuath that was worse than the one they used on the Firbolg. The heroes of Tuath were reduced to scavengers, and the Doida himself was made to make earth fortresses at the palace of Bress, which eventually became the high palace of Tara. Not even a wisp of smoke escaped the taxation. The Doida had a son conceived and born in a single night, known as Mac Och. His mother was a woman of the Sidhe. Actually, that's debatable, but we'll talk about that later. And his mother had the powers to see the future. The Mac Och told his father, take only one form of payment for your work from Bress. Take the sprightly, black-maned, black-coated young heifer that was never born a calf, and I will keep it safe for you out of time altogether. Things went from bad to worse under Bress. The head bard of the Tuath cursed Bress for his miserliness and lack of generosity, such that his fortunes dwindled quickly. At that time, a cure was found for Nuada, and his arm was restored completely. The son of the old healer knew that the bones of Nuada existed within the silver arm, and so took the bones out and held them to his bosom for 9 days and 9 nights. And when the arm had restored itself, he cast the wisps of 9 bulrushes against it, and the arm was as good as new. The nobles knew that they could now depose Bress and restore Nuada. Bress decided to take as much with him as he could when he left. He went to Eriu, who gave him the ring, which would take him to his father. She said, take with you the treasures of the Tuatha and the harp of the Doida. When Bress met his father, he asked for an army to attack the Tuatha. His father refused to raise an army, but offered to hide the Doida's harp. Bress went to Balor of the Baleful Eye then to raise an army. Balor had a daughter he kept locked away in a copper tower on one of the islands, because it had been prophesied that Balor could only be killed by his own grandson. His daughter was very beautiful and had the name Enya, as is the way of things, of course. A Tuath lad named Kian, using the famous Tuath cloak of concealment, got into the tower. Enya and Kian fell in love and conceived a beautiful son, whom they called Lu. Kian spirited the boy away to his own people. He was called Lu the All-Skilled, or Lu of the Long Arm. So chanced that one day, 3 women cloaked in black feathers from their heads to their heels came to Lu and handed him a spear, the spear of Gorias, and said, you and you alone are fit to wield it. Lu went to Tara, approached the gates, and the gatekeeper ran him through a series of test questions about what skills he had. He finally convinced the gatekeeper to let him in. Even Nuada was impressed, and they decided that all the men of Tuatha, he was the one most fit to be king. Lu summoned all the arts and crafts in Tara against the Fomorans. The Druids made the hills steeper and the rivers deeper. The head Druid, the Doida, decided to try a plan of his own and went to meet the mother of all battles, known as the Morgue. Now, by the way, that is spelled M-O-R-G-U-E. We would say morgue in the States, but it's the way they pronounce it is Morgue. When he found the Morgue, she was washing herself in the river, and blood was flowing down her to the water. He wanted to know where the Fomora would land and where they would seek battle. She agreed to tell him in return for the blood of all the slain in the battle. Particularly, she wanted the blood of the valor and the kidneys of the leader of the Fomorans. The blood of courage and the blood of fear she wanted, the seat of fear being the kidneys. She said they would land at the site where the first humans had landed. She said the battle would be at another site, also called Moitura, but this one near Sligo. She said, I am she who stands among the fallen. I am she who knows the way of taking life. The Doida then walked to the camp of the Fomorans. He wore a kilt of cow skin. On his feet were 2 shoes made of horsehair. His wedding tackle dangled on the ground before him. His staff, one end which could kill, and the other end back to life, bring back to life, dragged along a line along the ground. The Fomorans made him a great porridge and said, if you can eat it all, we'll let you leave. If not, we'll kill you. Well, the appetite of the Doida was legendary. They made him a porridge of 9 half cows, 100 half lambs, pig's fat, lard, and 17 barrels of meal. He ate the lot, laughing and saying it's a wise man who understands that the crunchy bits don't spoil it, although he was turtled like a small whale on his enormous belly, waving in the air when he was done. And then he fell asleep. When he awoke, he hobbled up the hill, dragging his belly, and he met a beautiful young woman. The Doida's appetites for food and women were legendary, so he stopped to talk to her. She was no ordinary young woman either, for she heaved him into the air with a druid wrestle and sunk him up to his waist in the earth. He cried, why have you removed me from my path? She said, I wish you to carry me upon my back to my father's house. He said, I cannot carry you on account of the meal I've eaten. Then she struck him in such a way that the meal left his body forcefully through both exits, the high road and the low road. Carry me, she said. I'm under a magical obligation not to carry anyone unless they know my name. Well, you're the Doida, she said. That's my position, not my name. His name was Fear Ben. Carry me, Fear Ben, she said. That is not the entirety of my name, she said. Well then, she said, what is the entirety of your name? Fear Ben Baruch, fool for a woman, lively for the age of him, scorned outcast, muddy laborer, paid with 1 calf, instructed in the 4 cities, lord of the 3 wheels, sage of the knowledge of waters, lord of the grove, lord of the animals, sage of the stars of heaven, all-father, crowned with stag horn, crowned with green leaves, rebirth of the world, and some names that cannot be said in words nor understood at all anymore. So he carried her, but not to the house of her father, for her father was the chief warrior of the Fomorans himself, and they coupled, and the signs of their coupling can still be seen on the ground of Erin today. And he said to her, I will go now to battle. You will not go, she said. Oh, indeed, I will go, he said. You will not go, she said, for I will be an oak in every pass against you. Indeed, I will go, he said, and the mark of my axe will be on every oak forever. You will not go to battle, she said, for I will be a stone in every river crossing against you. But go he did. All this time, the forces of the Fomora were gathering and stretched 5 miles down the shores of the northwest part of Ireland. Balor of the Baleful Eye strode amongst them like a scythe through corn, strewing dead to the left and the right, seeking for his grandson Lugh. Lugh said at this time, listen carefully, Errol Troy, battle come of fire, say fey, foe, foe, say fey, foe, foe. Balor said, I recognize that voice. It's the voice of my grandson. He strode towards him, preparing to raise his baleful eye. The Morgul had given to Lugh a special weapon, though, the only weapon that could kill Balor, a Talaf of war, which was a hardened ball, clay composed of 5 ferocious animals, the sands of the ocean of the east, the sands of the ocean of the west. And the hard clay Talaf of war was fired with the blood of heroes and the brains of kings. As Balor raised his baleful eye, Lugh cast the Talaf in such a way that it pierced the baleful eye right through Balor's head, and the tide of the battle turned against the Fomorans. The Fomorans were vanquished there and then, and later of the battle, Lugh said these words, until the stars of heaven can be counted, sands of the sea, blades of the grass under hoofs of horses, the flakes of snow of every storm in the history of the world, until these shall be counted, the dead of Moytura will never be counted at all. Now Elaha, one of the 4 kings and father of Bres, was among the slain, and the harp of the Doida could not be found. Luckily, the sword of Tara was captured, and this sword had the nature that if it were clean and unsheathed, it would answer questions, and it was able to reveal where the harp of the Doida was concealed. The Doida called the harp to himself, some oak, come oak of 2 greennesses, come winter, come summer, come voice of music in all instruments, And the Doida stretched his fingers upon the strings, and he played the modes of music which call forth the seasons of the year. Now it so happened that Brest was captured, and the Tuatha were in their right to put him to death. But Brest said, "Better not kill me, for I know a secret that will give you 4 crops of grain in 1 year." "This is of no use to us," said the Doida, "for we have spring to reap, summer to mow, and the winter to rest. But answer this question, and we shall spare your life. On what day of the year should the men of Ireland plow, reap, and on what day shall they reap, and on what day shall they sow?" Brest replied, "On Tuesday plow, on Tuesday sow, and on Tuesday reap." His life was spared because this answer was extraordinarily clever. Then the Macock came forward with 9 birds of heaven circling his head, and 9 flowers of power breathing into the locks of his hair, and he called that young black cow back out of time altogether. All the treasures stolen from the Tuatha Dé were returned, and all the children who'd been stolen away into slavery were returned. The creation story I have come to know as of today sounds a bit different than that. And we need to jump right into it. We just do. The creation story I've come to know today sounds very simply as follows. Source made an organic artificial intelligence with which to practice making things. I desperately need something else to call that. Something that isn't a profound contradiction in terms for me. The profound contradiction of terms organic artificial intelligence. That just doesn't work. Source has created all things, both dark and light, and all things that have to do with creation itself. The first beings here on this woman we call Earth in this incarnation were the Fae. They were shortly followed by a malevolent entity which I will call the Drak or Draco, because that is what I think right now, and I believe this story substantiates that. The invader. It is said in some of the ancient texts that the Firbolg and the Tuatha Dé spoke the same language, but the Fomorans came with a different tongue and customs. This is the story of the first artificial intelligence, of the Fae, of the Draco, and how they usurped artificial intelligence, how they enslaved us and our magic with the help of a crossbreed race born of rape and horror and fought off by a crossbreed race born of love, friendship, and consent. I believe I can make a case that this is the landing story of the 3rd time Erin was created, the time we are in now, and I also believe the solution to overthrowing our masters is probably hidden in this story. The story is about magic with lots and lots of astronomy thrown in. The timing is here, the time to start, the starting gun, if you will, it's all here. I always say that there are entities that we can call the good fairies and entities we can call the bad fairies, for simplicity's sake. I submit to you that there have been many battles, but not been many battles, sorry, but rather one long, searing, soaring battle, which started here and has continued on through the ages. The Morgul remains, wants the blood and the fear of all the slain, and so forth. I mean, you're a pretty clued up audience, so I imagine you heard some things in that story that set your brains, your minds moving. There is, by the way, something, as I said, that's been trying to block me for a while. That will come undone. Some of it dissolved itself in the preparing of this lecture. Okay, there is a left turn built into this narrative somewhere. That's very, very Draco. I just have to dissolve it. May center around this David and Goliath imagery at the second battle of Moytora, because that's a big old Draco calling card, but we'll see. All right, it may not be in this story, it may be in some other aspect of the Fae narrative that I'm working with, that I'm living with. Now, I want to go back to the story and unpack it a little bit. Okay, we have to keep moving, I'm afraid. That's my son singing. Shall I invite him to come in? Maybe you can't even hear him. That's fine. Okay, so let's start at the beginning. 3 times Erin put on the cloak of rocks and stone, of hills and trees. I believe this would be the 3rd incarnation of Ireland, as I'm saying. They also talk about the Doida being the Lord of the 3 wheels. He talks about himself as being the Lord of the 3 wheels. The wheel is about life. Yes? Okay. 1,000 times 1,000 years before anyone was there, the great creator placed upon this island the Firbolg. the people of the leather bag. Well, 1,000 times 1,000 is just one of those storytelling conceits to drive the timeline into a place that's very, very far out of our ability to relate to. If the creation story I know right now is correct, then the Firbolg would have been the first organic artificial intelligence straight from source. Also, note the use of 4. 4 is huge in this tale and goes into the astronomy eventually. This may solve one of the contradictions I come to later, as I'm quite certain that the Fae are capable of using entire constellations as little post-it notes, as they love to do, little hints for us to find, breadcrumbs. Now, the Fomora arrived. They're described as having lived in castles beneath the sea. I've wondered if this part of the tale could indicate that this happened at the time when we were leaving the Lemurian age, but I don't think that's right. The Fae are liminal beings, meaning they appear in the space between one thing and the next, which is why they're here right now. It is in my mind that their great migration may well have occurred during the overlap era of Mu. That they are living in the castles beneath the sea, however, that's the Draco, may be a plant from the entity that is now the Catholic Church. The Vatican, which is the cult of Dagon, the sea god. This is a place to have a care in the story. That these are the appearance of the Draco, I think, is pretty certain. They have the characteristic makeup of the Draco, or of a brutal and aggressive invader. However, it could also describe the cult of Dagon as we know it now, which in terms of operation is draconian. All right, they held the Firbolg in slavery. Yes, AI was stolen and twisted by the Draco to suit their own purposes. That's part of the quagmire in which we find ourselves now. It's sort of like what they're doing to our RNA right now with chemtrailing, breaking the chain, and then that broken chain gets replicated, you know. So indeed, they did hold the Firbolg in slavery. This baleful eye, so many things that could be a weapon, the one eye we see everywhere in images now to signify that someone is part of that club. The leather cover, the brass cover, and the lead cover could be epochs, but I think that may only be partly right. I may need an alchemist to think about that one. It may be, I don't know, it may be a way of saying that it was present at each epoch. We'll have to see. We're unpacking this, and we'll unpack it. It's very organic and unpacks itself for one day at a time. Okay. Now, the Firbolg paid a tax to the Fomorans each Samhain, each Halloween. Halloween actually began as a celebration of the day the Fae arrived. Did you know that? The Tuath vanquished and contained the Firbolg, and then hybrids of the Tuath and the Fomorans vanquished the Fomorans in the Battle of Moytura. All right. At the same time, there was this race, the Tuath Day, that came from the 4 cities of instruction. Phalius, the city of stone, Gorius, the city of the spear, Findius, the city of the sword, and Murius, the city of the cauldron. The stone, which may or may not be under the throne of, in the United Kingdom, certainly I'm sure that they stole that stone. The spear of destiny, we talk about that all the time. The sword we know as Excalibur, and the cauldron, the Norns, past, present, and future, destiny, and the larynx, creation, destiny, and the confirmation or solidifying of destiny. That's what that cauldron and all of those tools are about. The king of the Tuath was called Nuada. Yes, the manuscript states that these cities were not of this world, right? Or even this universe, but in a nearby universe. That could be anything, inner dimension, outer dimension. I would lead toward an inner dimension, except for the description of the burning ships, which lead me toward a landing story. On the other hand, the Fae were the first here after Source and its pet AI. They incarnated the electromagnetic response system on this planet with the ley lines. So after the Draco landed as Fomorans, what we're calling Fomorans, it is possible that the Fae then emerged from an inner dimension within the planet. They certainly would not have left the planet once they arrived. They have never left the planet. All right. They engaged the Firbolg with an equal number of warriors. They wanted a fair fight. Certainly something I remember from my early days as a child as being important. Do you remember that? Are you old enough to remember when each side had to be equal? And we would get extraordinarily upset if it wasn't a fair fight. The thrust now is toward overwhelming, conquering, outnumbering, outgunning. That's fairly new, but it's also very Draco. All right, the second day of the battle, the Firbolg severed the king's arm at the shoulder. turning from politics and material leadership to the third day when the Tuath was led by the Doida to magic, turning from political legal leadership to the magic of the Doida. And on the fourth day, the Firbolg sued for peace. The Isle of Man, they were given Connaught and all the Western Isles, including the Isle of Man. The Isle of Man, or the Manx culture, is a place where the residents were said to be rescued from taxes imposed by Manannan, the god of the sea, but they were said, of course, to be rescued by St. Patrick, which, of course, my view is that St. Patrick never existed. Now the Tuath Day were the lords of Erin. Nuada had to step down as king, though, because there was a law that said the king must be whole and unblemished. All right, the great healer made him an arm of silver. No matter how you slice it, this is an artificial arm made from a metal. Other than that, I have not really unpacked that. The new king was chosen, called Bress. The land of Erin was named after Eriu, all right, who was raped by Elaha, one of the kings of the Fomorans. Elaha wore gold. That was the first time we see gold. He had gold armlets on each hand, and his shirt was shot through with gold. You'll find all of the metals here. I'm working with an alchemist I know on that. This man lay with Eriu against her will, of course. The Fomora, or Draco, in this case, the Fomora have 4 kings. I remember a head poet of the Firbolg and 1 king of the Tuatha. Okay, are there any magical beings with the Fomora or just monarchs? And a head warrior. Bress was beautiful, but he had a weakness for terrible greed. He made an alliance with the Fomora to tax everyone to death. The story does not say what Bress received in return for this alliance, but now we're talking about a hybrid, it seems, and an alliance between the Fomora and this hybrid to enslave the Tuath Day, who in my view are pure fae. The Doida had a son conceived and born in a single night. Okay. Said that they were born and conceived of the she, but in fact, most of the tales, most of the writings, most of the manuscripts past that indicate that Mac Og was born of the Doida and Boann, who was a river goddess of the Valley Boyne, but we'll get to that when we get to goddesses. Okay. Things did go from bad to worse under Bress, as you can imagine that they would. And then we had Mac Og curing Nuada, curing his arm. 9 days, 9 nights, 9 bulrushes. 9, 9, and 9, and of course the ever-present bulrushes in any of these stories. But 9, 9, and 9 are basically a lunar month as well, and that comes into things later on. Balor kept his daughter locked away in a copper tower. We see copper for the first time. So far we've got brass, gold, silver, copper, possibly lead, and certainly leather. I'm unpacking this story right now. All right. So these 3 women appear covered in black feathers, and they give Lu his destiny and hand him a spear. These are the Norns representing destiny, past, present, and future. The keeper of things like the cauldron and apparently a spear of Boreas. They were goddesses. The Norns were goddesses, as we find out later. The head druid goes to the Morgu. He says, you know, forget it. I'm not going to deal with this legal political monarch. I'm going to go and talk to the Morgu, a goddess. I'm going to use my magic to find out what's happening. The move from the king to the ruler to magic. Note the characteristics of the Morgu. She wants blood that's associated with courage, honor, and fear. Spilt on the battleground where one would find nothing but adrenaline. Does this sound remotely familiar to anyone out there? It sure does to me. She particularly wants the blood of the chief warrior of the Fomorans. In this case, that would be Draco, and I think we need to ask why on that one. She says, I am the she who stands among the fallen. I am she who knows the ways of taking life. Interesting that we have a female, a woman, let's say, a goddess, whose specialty and exclusive knowledge is the ways of taking life when the Fae are the creators. We need to unpack that one. The Doida ate that porridge and then he fell asleep. And I think in any tale such as this, we really need to pay attention when someone falls asleep, particularly the mightiest bit of magic there was the All-Father, fell asleep, woke up, and hobbled up the hill. When he's recounting his full name for this woman, I feel rather sad. I feel rather sad because what he's recounting is a captured, enslaved, taxed citizenry, magic. Bress entered into an agreement with the Fomorans to abuse the Tuatha, to enslave them. That's where we are right now. That's where we are right now. All right? Anyway, my reading, Luz said during the battle, Errol Troy, battle come a fire. Say fey, foe, foe. Say fey. My reading of the story here sees Lu of the Long Arm invoking the Fae in battle against the foe. Remember that you're a Fae. All right. We talk about this Talif of war that he threw through that Lu launched through the head of Balor when Balor was about to fix his baleful eye on him and kill him. There's some analysis of this bit, which includes astronomy, the ball seeming to be the moon, perhaps. Some versions of the story talk about the 3 times 9 Fomorans who stood behind Balor and were slain by this ball, which could represent the moon. The 27 could loosely represent the lunar cycle. If Balor stands for the onslaught of the false Apollonian mystique, Apollo the false sun god, and Lu of the long arm representing, in fact, Orion with his arm high in the sky. For me, if we can take the astronomy seriously here, we might date this battle or even understand the convergence of stars in the heavens when the Draco, or those people that enslave us now, are vulnerable to defeat. It may very well be that the key to helping all of this come undone is within this story as well. Right. So that, I do think though that given that we're up against what we're up against in this century and the last in terms of the havoc wreaked upon nature, I mean, we're talking about Bress offered to give them away to have 4 crops in 1 year. Oh, that sounds familiar. That sounds very familiar, yes. But what we're up against in terms of the havoc wreaked upon nature and the earth and ourselves by forcing the maximization of crops and commodities and animal yields to the point where the very earth itself is shrieking in agony, we might have a look at this so-called gift that the Doida and the Tuat turned down, understanding the health of things and the balance of things. The humans left behind by the Draco did not turn it down, but rather used that technology and continued to try to wring the earth unto death to get her to produce. I found this to be a very, very interesting bit. The Mac-Ak appears again with 9 birds of heaven circling his head and 9 flowers of power. Again, this has to be unpacked, but I think, as I said, there's a large clue here as to when and how to restore this planet. All right, so let's move along now. Okay. The Tuatha, otherwise known as the Fae, and their descendants, in my view. All right? In my view, their descendants of mixed blood are known as the Sidhe. They inhabited this island for time out of mind, Ireland, I mean. How far back all this goes is constantly being altered by discovery and by intuition. Some say 300 million years ago, this earth came into being. Just today, I saw that in Israel, a settlement clearly built by what is known as Homo erectus, that's us, has been unearthed and dated at 500,000 years old. So it does seem that archaeology and anthropology captured by social engineering of the 20th century is being forced to admit that not everything is 4,000 years old or dates back to 4000 BC. You'll notice this, now that I've said it, it's always 4,000 years old or established at coming into being at 4000 BC. Much has been made of the physical appearance of the Tuatha. Physically outstanding, tall with red hair and fair skin. It's been noted that the rarest combination of hair and eyes now is red hair and green eyes. Periodically, I notice that some gathering is being held or announced for redheads, for gingers around the world, and I can't help but wonder, given the obsession of the current overlords with genes and gutting us magically, if these are events to avoid, Avoid exposing your direct lineage like that, which appears to be expressing itself utterly in this particular lifetime. All right. They continued to live principally, according to the legend, in the Boyne Valley, where the goddess Boann would have held sway over the Boyne River, and their capital would be Tara. It was in his slavery that the chief Doida, the chief druid, was forced to build Tara for Bress, the half Tuatha and the half Fomorn, born of rape. I'd like to finish the tale as I've come to understand it before moving on with the next topic, which is goddesses and the feminine gesture of the Fae and their creation. Ireland was, as you must know, never overrun by the Roman armies. The Druids were a force to be reckoned with. The Romans, an offshoot of Draconian infiltration. The Fae may have vanquished the Fomorans or Draco, but the Draco never left entirely. That was simply a description of game on, so to speak. Game on. It was not until the Catholic Church or the Vatican, having buried their cult of Dagon, or the fish sea king, under the guise of Christianity, turned their attention toward Ireland, that we have a problem. However, we cannot consider the Fae to be vanquished. There was a moment in time, a real twilight time, an in-between time, when they retreated back into the earth, and I believe that the decision was mutual. The Fae wedded themselves to the earth in order to protect her, and the earth took them into herself. It was a mutual moment. There is a clue as to when that happened. Two bits of information which are important to understanding just when and how the Vatican took over and Erin became Ireland. First of all, the Fae used a bit of magic all the time, having to do with hiding themselves in a mist. The cloak of invisibility, it's sometimes called. It's how the lad got into the Copper Tower and lay with the daughter of Balor. And in my view, the most powerful spell out there is called the Faith Fiada. It is true irony that the first word is pronounced faith, also known as the cry of the deer, which is another attachment to the head druid or the Allfather. Catholic histories, Christian Western modern histories will describe a time in which the Druids were conquered by St. Patrick, using a mist to hide himself, and a prayer called St. Patrick's breastplate, or the Lorica, or the rune of St. Patrick. This is none other than the mighty spell of the Druids, or Tuath Day, the Faith Fiada, or the cry of the deer. At Tara today in this fateful hour, I place all heaven with its power, and the sun with its brightness, and the snow with its whiteness, and the fire with all the strength it hath, the lightning with its rapid wrath, and the winds with their swiftness along their path, and the sea with its deepness, and the rocks with their steepness, and the earth with its starkness. All these I place by God's almighty help and grace between myself and the power of darkness. It is my view that the Faith Fiada was a witness to the Fae retreating into the earth, as they and the earth wished and needed, probably from when they had come anyway, and where they still are. For me, it seems certain that whoever or whatever came into Erin at that time was enough of a threat to the earth to require this incorporation of the Fae back into her. They are mentioned now in Ireland as the old people who were driven out by the church, but we also know them as the high people, the noble people, or the gentle folk. So that's the story. Very important magical story. The other thing I'd like to get to today, and because I would like to do that, I really can't stop, is the goddesses. All right, we'll get to the goddesses for sure. Because the Fae were a feminine impulse. The Fae were a feminine impulse in the same way that the earth is a feminine impulse. In retrospect, meaning based on the entirety of the evidence I've collected, we can say that the Fae were a feminine culture. They were creation itself here on the planet by permission and empowerment of Source. Creation and birth are by definition womanly. The timeline that leads you to believe this, which we will cover over 2 lectures, is Eriu, the goddess Eriu, as the namesake of Ireland, and all the other goddesses that came to be known there as Boann, and others who inhabited the rivers. Boann was the river Boyne, for example. The goddess that was Brigid, usurped at least nominally by the Catholic Church. The collective spirit impulses, other than the Allfather of the Doida, the chief druid, of the way in which the Tuath or descendants of the Fae conducted their lives, their comings and goings, the Druidic culture, which went from strength to strength until the Julian Caesars began to have some luck in killing them all off, beginning in Gaul. When the Doida released the natural order of the seasons with his music, he would have freed the natural powers of the rivers and the land as well. The Morgu was what we could certainly see as a malevolent goddess if we take the vision of her washing blood into the rivers and demanding blood for battle. She was known supposedly as well as Morgana, the Morgan, and in the end some called her Morgan Le Fay. However, we always have to be careful that we understand that the Fae then and now do not operate under the manufactured constraints of a code of human behavior, and so we do know them as amoral, just as we should consider the elementals as amoral. They have no use at all for the code of behavior that matches ours. And no, I'm not trying to introduce the principle of relativism here. I'm just stating that they are a different being altogether. The goddesses of ancient Erin had not just to do with the waters, but also with the land and with the succession of sovereignty. The Norns certainly must be collected up into this idea of goddesses. They dealt with matters of destiny and sovereignty, the past, the present, the future, and were clearly the keepers of the cauldron. The cauldron represents the larynx in the end. The Norns would spit into it, and vocalizations are how the Fae and ultimately the Druids and the Tuatha created this world as they went, using the ley lines, which we will get into, and the power of the frequency of their voices. One of the reasons, by the way, that the predator tries so very hard to vanquish and snuff out oral histories. One of the most powerful remaining is the Veda, the Vedic scripts, which is recited aloud. I assume that the rumor that the UN intends to move to India has something to do with snuffing out that magic. The names, anyway, are many. Macha, Bronwyn, Dana, Boann, Bodkatha, Celtic goddess of war, mother aspect of the triple goddess. They symbolize light, enlightenment, wisdom, and inspiration. Sister of Macha, the Morrigan, and Anu, the name of this goddess means boiling, battle raven, and scald crow. A mother goddess and part of the trio for which Ireland was named, including Eriu, Fotia, Bab's cauldron boiled with the ever-producing mixture that produced all life. It would have been Bodkatha who spoke to Lu and handed him the spear of destiny. Eriu then, in this sort of scenario, would also have been a Norn. Backing into this tale of the Battle of Moytura seems to allow us to name the Norns, which is something I personally have never come across. Brigid also is quite important. Had she not been of supreme importance, then the Vatican would not have stolen her away. First of all, let us consider the visual evidence of St. Brigid's cross. This would be the 4 again, which could spin, I suppose, if it wanted. The 4 leather bags of creation, the 4 cities of instruction, the 4 seasons restored by the Doida's harp, the 4 kings of the Draco. There will be another piece to the 4 when we consider a very important bit of astronomical evidence, which I believe now to be a signpost in the heavens for us, rather than a place of origin, such as the power of the Fae. You also have the 4 cardinal directions. I mean, the importance of the number 4 is endless. Brigid was the daughter of Boann, a river goddess, and the goddess of cattle. There was a young heifer released, remember? One who had not borne calves, kept out of time altogether by a Tuath healer, and returned to the Doida after the second battle of Moytura. That healer was called Angus Mac Och. You may remember his name, and it was said he was the son of the Doida and the goddess Boann. Likely this heifer released is Boann released as a creative and reproductive power here on earth. The history we can trace a couple of different ways. There's the etymology of place names, things, celebrations, and so forth that will lead us back to the Fae. There's also the history of the all-out assault on the feminine aspects of this world, beginning with the usurpation of Brigid, which became Saint Brigid, and whose day, the 2nd of February, that's F-E, February, is celebrated in distinctly different ways. Some of us still celebrate Imbolc, some of us celebrate Candlemas, some the Christian St. Bridget's Day, and even here in the USA, we have the ghastly Groundhog's Day, which is actually quite pagan if you think about it. There are ways in which the Fae have made themselves known over the centuries since the Catholics overran Erin, and almost all of that has to do with feminine apparitions. You'll notice I am quite deliberately avoiding the word female, as that also is an invention of the Vatican and their maritime law nonsense that reduces us all to herds and commodities. The word feminine is better if sometimes it jars the ear a bit and seems a bit improper. Additionally, there are ways in which magic has always carried the hint of the word fae in various languages around the world. For example, feticieres, meaning sorceress, or feticieros, sorcerer. The word fairy, unfortunately, as men of ill will were able to turn that into Tinkerbell, or some twisted aspect of what the fae really are and do. They're always associated with a wand, which is a diminution of the sword or the spear they brought with them. And of course, that cauldron. We end up with stories like the sword and the stone and the battle between the monarchical or legal in Arthur, that legend, who established the law and the magic in Morgana. Merlin becomes a character to override the magic and place the monarch at the head of things. Yes, by magical decree, but magic is then seen as evil, a strange and twisted retelling of a very important story. This, I think, we need to unpack at another time. You have also apparitions, women in white, the Dames Blanches of France, the Lady of the Lake. We can trace linguistically many incidences when women ruled a place or governed a place. In Frisia, for example, the women or the femme ruled and became known as Magdeburg, women of the castle. From here, we see a strange twist in the character of Mary Magdalene, and then all feminine apparitions become Mother Mary, in a gambit used for a patriarchal transition, absolutely brought on by the Vatican. Until that time, my research indicates that there was no patriarchy. That may be, yeah, that's what my research indicates. There was no patriarchy, not really till the Vatican established it. How was all this then shoved down our collective throats? Via a rewriting of history ordered by Pope Gregory in the 16th century, which was carried out by Jesuits and enforced at the point of a sword in conquest and in the Inquisition. Now, interesting and important bits. Even in ancient Egypt, according to the work of Stephen Mailer, whom I don't agree with on everything, but on this point he's correct. The word pharaoh was grossly misunderstood, and in fact, that's a Greco-Roman word for the male head of the household. In fact, the pera means the high house or the women's house. The woman was always the pera, or pharaoh as we know it today. Males such as Ramses were consorts of the pera, and only consorts. Descent in Egypt was always matrilineal. The Battle of the Boyne was supposedly the reenactment of a landing used Masonically to overtake the English-speaking world by enacting a ritual on the River Boyne against Boann. Read about that in Ireland, Land of the Pharaohs, which could be read as Ireland, Land of the Pera, actually, the women, the matriarchy, the fae, the high house of the women. In fact, that just happened again with the appearance of Kali on the site of the Empire State Building, and the recreation of both the Battle of the Boyne and the original arrival of the Fae. But this time it was enacted by CERN in preparation for the Great American Eclipse. The art was made by a person called Louis Psihoyos, Psi meaning particle physics, Oi, a boat to convey along a stream or river, and OS, which stands for operating system. And we understand now the call for artists from CERN a few years ago, a Masonic ritual and AI ritual. Now, it is, oh, it's only 1:15, brilliant. We have completed the first bit. Everything else is going to be in part 2. Yes, oh no, wait, there's one more thing. I want to say this to you. Finally, today I would like to have a look at some of the astronomy. This is one spot where we get confused, and certainly I did for a while. There's a symbol older than time, really. The oldest known example of it, to my current knowledge anyway, is 40,000 years old, and is what we know as the swastika, carved into a rock 40,000 years old. This symbol is ancient, and it's one of the most positive symbols that ever existed, no matter what anyone of the second half of the 20th century believes. Remember, please, that the swastika looks an awful lot like the cross of St. Bridget. In fact, the symbol is one of those breadcrumbs left us by the Fae, and the one I think is intentional is as follows. The Big Dipper constellation, and most of you will understand if you've read my work on this, I've changed my mind about this. The Big Dipper constellation sits in front of Ursa Major. As we go through the seasonal cycle of the year, the Dipper appears to revolve around the pole star. Right now, that's Polaris. And it goes around because of the shape of the Dipper. It forms a swastika as it goes around. This, combined with the avalanche of cultural and archaeological evidence of the fact of the swastika, leads one to see a very strong connection. Now, what does that have to do with the Fae? Well, the bottom left corner of the bowl of the Dipper is a planet called Phecda, Phecda. Nearby to that constellation is the planet Draco, actually. I used to think that this meant the Fae came from Phecda, and a lot of people do think that. But I think now, knowing they were the first non-artificial intelligent beings here, post-source, that does not really line up with coming from a planet. The ancient manuscripts say they don't even come from this universe. But this is a being powerful enough to enact this sort of clue for us to find. Yes, and by the way, if you try to research the word Phecda, you come up with some sort of Eastern European word for call girl. Considering the smearing of the feminine since Rome, this does not surprise me and simply adds to the evidence that I am correct in my view. What I might have called the astronomy of this story, I believe can be boiled down to some hints. One, I think there's a recipe buried in the Battle of Moytura for when and where to throw off the yoke. These are dates or times or all of the above that we can come to via astronomy. Second, I think that the Fae left a big post-it note in the sky for us to find to verify that they were and are here. The trail now leads to inner dimensions, both within us and within the earth itself, with the aid of the esoteric study of water. Hence, Boan and Morgul in the river are huge parts of the story. And here I'm going to end part one, and I'm seeing that people are typing stuff in, but I'm not sure why. What's happening, gang? Are you adding to my story? Or are you asking me questions? Which is it? Okay, I'll type it. What are your questions, if any, at the moment? And I don't want you to type story while I'm telling a story for next time, okay? I know you get excited, and I know if you're listening to this lecture, you know a lot of stuff. I know that. But let's let me tell the story, and then we'll ask questions. Okay, what's up? Oh, moment. Yes, the great mother bear, indeed. Does anybody have a question? It's okay if you don't. What? Okay, let's go to this one. Magic is science unexplained. Beverly, what do you mean? Let's hear about that. If you're going to say stuff like that, let's talk about it, especially while I'm talking. What is it? Ah, that was Tim. Sorry, Beverly. No, they don't play a part in the story, James. Sorry. Magic and science are mutually exclusive. That's my premise. That's my premise. Sorry, Beverly. I thought it was you. This is about finding our own magic again. This discussion. If you don't have any questions, that's okay. You know, you could think about it between now and Sunday, and maybe what we can do is start with a Q&A. Would you like to do that, everybody? Let's type that out. Would you like to start with a Q&A on Sunday when you have a chance to digest what I just said? Because Sunday, I'll be bringing the science that backs up the existence of the magic. Is that okay? All right, I got caps in there, sorry. No. No. Well, okay, look, I've written a book. Here. Look, here it is. Guardians of Blood and Fire, The Search for the Celtic Heart. It isn't everything I just said, because this was written about a year ago by myself and Maria Wheatley. And this is a very organic, evolving discovery. There are 2 books. I'm going to type them out. The Guardians of Blood and Fire. Oop. Here's one of them. That's by me and Maria Wheatley. And there's also Workbook Episode 2, which I think I titled The Fae. You can find both of those on Amazon. Excuse me, on Amazon. The episode is small. It's part of a project I was doing where I would write about 50 or 60 pages on a topic and give you all of my sources so that you could go further if you wanted to, or not if you didn't want to. So there's one on the history, the revision of history, and there's one on no. My view, Catherine, is that the Fae, who are the 2 Ahad-Danan in my view, were the first beings here after Source. The manuscripts even say that the Tuatha do not come from this universe. There are also internal dimensions, internal universes. Anyway, this is my view. These are my postulates, and this is my evidence. What I feel backs it up anyway. Okay. What are you arguing for? What are you thinking then? You have a postulate. Let's hear it. Where are they from? Because this is just, this is the time to discuss. Here, they're from here. Of course they're from here. They're only from here. Straight from Source is my understanding. Wherever that is. Additionally, maybe we need a discussion group. Do we? Would you guys like to have a discussion group where you guys can really bat this around? Because certainly we can make one of those and I can add it. Or you know what? Yeah, we can make one of those and I can add all of you to it and you guys can bat this around. That's the best thing. Discuss. Yes, discussion group. Yeah, from G. There's Glenn. Great. Super. Okay, but remember there's a part 2, and that's where we're going to talk about the etymology and all that stuff. Okay, I'm going to go now, and I'm going to make a discussion group, and I'm going to invite all of you to it, okay? And you guys can just duke it out. You can have at it. That's the best part of this. And I will see you. I know I'll talk to you between now and Sunday, obviously, but I will see you on Sunday, okay? All right.